Jacinda that I sent you, that was an interesting interview. I thought it was just some woman on some talk show, and I think Jacinda really believes all this bullshit that she puts out there. What do you think?
Well, it's yes and no kind of situation, because if you look at how psychopaths work kind of thing, there's often a lot of things that they do believe, even though they should know for a fact that they're not true, to the point of fact that they can even pass lie detector tests because they believe their own BS, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I guess she does believe it, even though she knows it's not true. That'll get your head around it.
Yes, that's true. Well, it's kind of like Muhammad Ali. He thought he was the greatest thing in the world, and what happens eventually too, though, is when you push that narrative so much, a bunch of other people start to believe it too. I am the greatest, and all these other people think I'm the greatest too. It kind of goes that way. Who's the prime minister now, Vinny? And what's
Mr.
going on in New Zealand right now?
Chris Luxon. And what's been going on in New Zealand right now across the sort of stage, if you will, is very similar to how you might think of the world media. There's lots of talk about Trump. There's lots of talk about the war and this, that, and the other place. And there's also a lot of lies coming through from the government and just making things happen the way that they do. Yes. And I believe that there's another thing called managed retreat that's been passed, and what that's doing is it's allowing, for example, the New Zealand government to compulsorily take over people's land near beachfronts, near waterways, and be able to take that land forcibly off of people in order to prepare us for climate change. So it's basically just another land grab that has happened throughout history many, many times. And at the moment we also have the subject of Gaza coming up in Parliament, where he's technically a former Prime Minister, but he's now currently a minister in the government, Winston Peters, who decided that they would not recognise Gaza as a nation in the United Nations. So the way that New Zealand works is I would say it's very similar, but also dissimilar in some ways to the majority of how nations work. It's dissimilar in this way, that the parliament is sovereign, and that means no previous parliament can tie any future parliament into action. So, for example, if one parliament passes something like the Bill of Rights, then the next parliament theoretically can just throw them out. And they did. That's why they added Section 14 into the Bill of Rights, which, if you were to translate it out of legalese, gobbledygook, just says, you've got all these rights, like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, etc., unless we come up with a reason why you don't have them anymore.
Yes.
So that's legislatively how New Zealand basically works. It's been called a prime ministerial dictatorship. What makes that situation even worse than that is what you might consider to be the limitations therein. So, for example, if you have a commission against corruption that operates in your country, like they do in Australia, that has certain laws, that has certain overwatch procedures, that has certain ways of preventing people from coming out of Parliament and then directly into corporate jobs that have been facilitated more or less, right? Whereas in New Zealand, we don't have that. So you could, for example, like former Justice Minister Simon Powers, who put a man named Alan Hubbard's company into receivership for no reason. It was the biggest company in New Zealand, actually, at the time. Government just puts it into receivership for no reason. The prime beneficiary of that receivership was Westpac Corporate Bank, and then Simon Power left Parliament, and the day after he left Parliament, he heads up Westpac Corporate Banking. right? That's
Yeah.
that's how very lax New Zealand is in terms of any kind of legal framework for stopping corruption. Now, in terms of how legislation actually works on the local level, we've got the Committee for Auckland, New Zealand Infrastructure, and the New Zealand Initiative. Now, the structure of these three organisations is very similar, but they go 1, 2, 3. New Zealand Initiative at the top, the Infrastructure New Zealand in the middle, and the Committee for Auckland at the bottom. So, Committee for Auckland, you have to pay $10,000 in order to join by credit card, and you will be able to come to these meetings, which are headed up by the largest corporate and PR spin people in the country, or at least in Auckland anyway, which is our largest city. Then, if you go over to Infrastructure New Zealand, you will find almost a carbon copy of all of those big contractors and foreign companies that have memberships of that organization. And then if you go up to the other one, it's just the same thing again. So in parliamentary process, it's very different to the United States, where you have states and Congress and Senate and so on and so forth. You have checks and balances, right? 3 things. Whereas in New Zealand, what we have is these 3 unelected corporate bodies who dictate what gets implemented in New Zealand. For instance, just up the road from me is going to be yet another set of speed bumps and unnecessary traffic lights when they could have just built a roundabout. And that's part of Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is promoted by these 3 big think tank groups, and the local governments, when they pass things, and I found this out from the mayor of the Horowhenua, Michael Fayan, when he tried to legalize hemp production, what he found was that these corporate think tanks, basically, if you could call them that, have approval process over local elected officials. So if a local elected official says, I love my people, I'm going to pass this legislation, then he passes it through his local council, that's great. And then it goes to these think tanks and they yay or no it, right? And they always know the good things and they also yay the bad things, right? That's how it works. We had I think an investigator of 40 years experience out of Scotland Yard who came here to investigate corruption, and out of the I think he'd been in over 50 countries investigating corruption, and he says that New Zealand is by far, he said, the most corrupt country he's ever worked in. So this is a big shock to a lot of people because they believe that New Zealand is one of the least corrupt countries in the world. Now, there is a reason why they believe that, is because the corruption is so overarching and so powerful that reports of corruption do not get out, okay? And in particular, the international community, from Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, which they release every year, where New Zealand is usually number 1 or number 3 at the least corrupt country in the world. Now, the reason that is because the representatives for Transparency International in New Zealand, if you have a look at their members list, are exactly the same membership as the 3 groups I previously discussed with you. And Transparency International's questionnaire for corruption is voluntary. Alright? So, bro, have you guys got any corruption there in New Zealand? Nah, bro, it's all G. Okay, sweet as, you're the least corrupt country in the world. Good on you guys. Alright, that's literally how it works.
That's pretty wild, Vinny. I wouldn't have expected it to be more corrupt because New Zealand still has only about 5 million people. It seems as though this kind of corruption doesn't take hold in smaller countries as much as it does take hold in larger ones, but New Zealand is the exception to the rule. It's
well, think of the Cayman Islands, for example. When I say Cayman Islands or Swiss banks, you think of money laundering, right? And there was
I think of just private banking. I don't necessarily think of money laundering. And I don't know. I don't think of money laundering as being a corrupt practice. I just see it as covering your tracks and trying to maintain your privacy.
Yeah, well, potato. And what's happening in New Zealand is because we're a former British banking colony. Of course, the Bank of England, owned by the Rothschilds since the Battle of Waterloo, when they took over the entire banking system of that time, and the Klan's been in charge of banking worldwide ever since. Now, in the Panama paper leaks, I forget which year that was, but New Zealand was mentioned something like 60,000 times in those worldwide money laundering leaks. So there is a river of dirty money that comes through New Zealand. You would be thinking of it as in the Cayman Islands, for example, offshore bank accounts. Cayman Island, also a former British banking colony. And so therefore, if you look at the corruption inherent in the British banking system controlled by the Rothschilds, and you look at these Commonwealth countries that have not yet been granted their independence or fought wars to get away from the banking system as those in the United States did, you will basically be heavily involved in money laundering to this day. That's the general kind of principle as far as I've seen.
Well, and it is interesting you pointed out, since the Battle of Waterchild, because apparently the Rothschilds had information. Basically, they knew Napoleon lost at Waterloo a day before everybody else did. So they hedged up. So they used all of that information to hedge their bets, so to speak. And that, of course, would have been significant information. I'm not sure exactly what they bought, but it's kind of like insider trading when you have information before it's public. But there wasn't anything against it. Of course, this was when we didn't have radio and didn't have TVs like an internet like we have now. So it was a very different era. So.
Yeah. And that was the thing, because of the intelligence gathering operations of the Rothschild family at that time was indeed even more sophisticated than the British and royal government at the time, MI6 and what have you. Incidentally, they have an all-seeing eye pyramid as their symbol for MI6, but that's neither here nor there. So when we look at the world's stage in terms of intelligence, and you would be putting things into certain categories, for example, the United States being the military center of the world, the London being the financial center of the world, and the Vatican City being the spiritual center of the world, as far as power blocks are concerned, and as well as these three city-states are not technically part of the countries that they reside in. Vatican City is not Italian, London is not English, and DC is not American. These are private businesses essentially operating as the capitals of these nations in terms of their power brokering. So with the combination of the military, religion, and finances, you can control the vast majority of this planet if you're working in concert.
Yes, I never imagined, I used to work at a magazine, Liberty Magazine, and Bill Bradford, the publisher, went down to New Zealand and came back and said so many nice things about New Zealand. I really made me interested in going to visit there. And now, just ever since 2019 and watching the insanity happen there, just it seems like it's worse than Canada, Britain, or Australia.
Pretty much.
And I'm sorry to hear that. I would think, for example, that a country that small, how many people are in your parliament? So
less than 200. Less than 200.
Yeah. So less than 200, but still one person in parliament represents about what? With less than 4 million, that'd be 200, and we'll say divided by 5 million.
Roughly 6 million now. So when I first started being an activist around about the 2008 era, I recall I remember how I mentioned Winston Peters before, he wouldn't recognize Gaza at the UN. He was talking about commissioned management and how the Rothschilds use commission management as a way to manage their enormous wealth. And he also talked about the mass immigration plan that is happening and being implemented in New Zealand, where at that stage a country of 5 million people was getting 50,000 immigrants per year, whereas by comparison a similar sized nation like Sweden or Finland, they allow 500 immigrants a year. Now, the reason that this has been implemented is something I'll come to in the start of it, but in Finland, Sweden, they keep immigration down significantly, so that way when people come in, they're incapable of creating entire communities for themselves. So that means that they are forced to assimilate and become part of the already established community and culture in those nations. New Zealand, on the other hand, I just saw, and Australia and many other nations around the world now at this stage are experiencing record immigration. Now, that was back in the day when I was reporting 2008. We were bringing in 50,000 as opposed to 500 for a similar sized nation.
Yeah.
And recent reports say that the figure is closer to between 138 and 150,000 per year. So we are being absolutely flooded with people with different cultures who are coming here in such numbers that they do not have to in any way assimilate. So walking around and going into shops or ordering takeaways or going on the phones and getting people on things, sometimes it is very difficult to understand people's accents if they can speak English, and in some cases they can't speak English at all. The Chinese guy who came here for my landlord came to fix something, and he actually had to type in Chinese, translate on his phone, and show the phone for me in order to communicate, right? This is somebody who's living here and working here and cannot have a passable conversation without Google Translate on their phone, right? How does that affect social cohesion? Is this person coming to New Zealand barbecues with other Kiwis and things of that nature, integrating into the community? No. I would seriously doubt that. The language barrier alone makes that unlikely.
Vinny, but one thing I was saying about the corruption is if you got 200 in Parliament, then that means you only got about 30,000 people per every rep. I mean, I would think you could get elected to the Parliament with simply by knocking on doors and getting out to know people in your community. Or does that not make a difference? I mean, because here in America, a congressman probably represents 800,000 people. I mean, you can't get elected to the American Congress without money. It's just not going to happen. But
yes, and when you get that money, or the people who gave it to you, as soon as you get elected and get the power, the people who gave you that money want you to do things with that power other than what you promised to do. Now, this was given a lot of coverage in a documentary by a man named Alistair Barry called Someone Else's Country, where again, Winston Peters was interviewed as saying that after the Prime Minister is elected, that's our president, he will have his first meeting the next day after the election result, and Treasury, which in New Zealand is controlled by the Rothschilds, because right next to Parliament on Molesworth Street in Wellington at the Beehive, incidentally a Masonic symbol, symbolizing the perfect society for the top-down queen, right? Yes. And incidentally designed by a Freemason who was also our former Prime Minister. So right across the street is the Central Bank of New Zealand, all right, kind of like the Federal Reserve. And so I went there, and behind the front desk is a giant Rothschild family crest, a big red shield. Okay, so that you know who the corporate masters of the bankers are. So, so these Treasury agents, first day on the job for the Prime Minister, get the Prime Minister into a meeting, and they say, "Well, Mr. Prime Minister, congratulations on your winning. Unfortunately, you know all those promises that you've been making? Yeah? You're not going to be able to fulfill any of them. Well, why not? Well, because the last Parliament, they were covering up a huge economic problem, which we actually caused. And if you don't continue to cover up this economic problem, then the entire country is going to implode financially, and we will make sure that the public thinks that you are to blame for that, and you might get lynched in the streets. Do you have any questions? Yeah, what is it you want me to do? Well, we've got a whole bunch of lists of things here which are basically the opposite of everything that you promised everybody, and you don't have any choice. You have to implement this. Congratulations, Prime Minister. You're now in charge of the country. I love it! I freaking love it!
Vinny, you could make your own documentaries with cartoons and then just do the voiceovers for all of them. I love this. That's why I brought you back on here. I knew this would be a fun show. Mm-hmm. But even though it's not a fun topic,
I make it fun. All right, that's why it's called making light. All right.
Yes.
Rather than making the dark.
Vinny, where are these immigrants coming from? I mean, it seems like to me that these immigrants aren't just coming here spontaneously or on their own. It sounds like somebody's maybe going out and saying, hey, let's round up a bunch of immigrants in this country and take them off to New Zealand, and we'll see if we can completely change New Zealand by shipping all these immigrants here. I mean, what do you is somebody behind all this? I mean, I don't think it's just a case of 50,000 people or 100,000 people all deciding at once that they want to go to New Zealand, is it?
No. Dr. David Day, as reported by David Icke, was in one of the meetings of what G. Edward Griffin called the group. All right, it's not an organization that has a name. People might call them the Illuminati or the Freemasons or whatever, but this organization doesn't actually have a name, and G. Edward Griffin called them the group. And Dr. David Day was at one of the group's meetings, and it said that they would be flooding the West with, quote, this is their quote, not mine, human garbage. People with low IQs, no skills, people who are going to be dependent on the state, and to flood the West with these people because the West's idea of personal liberty, freedom, that kind of thing needs to be destroyed. So if you have people from a culture that do not share that very strongly held belief, when they're voting, they will be voting generally for the government that gives them the most benefits that they don't have to work for. All right, and that's not to say that these immigrants don't work. Yes, they absolutely do. And in point of fact, the sperm count in New Zealand and the fertility rates is so low from various different factors that unless this immigration thing was happening, the entire economy would be kaput. You'd be better to think of New Zealand not as a nation, but as a small beachside community. Okay, that is affected in in general same ways by large amounts of people suddenly coming into this small beach community. So in Australia, the incidence is becoming so interesting. I believe I saw a post on Instagram before, and I talked to my ex Rebecca about it, that this woman it was investigating Islam and its encroachment into the West, and she went into this particular suburb in Sydney, I believe it was, I can't remember exactly the name of the suburb, with the intention of going to the mosque. Now, as soon as she even so much as entered this suburb, she was getting jeered at, people were yelling Arabic across the street at her, she felt very unsafe, and then a high-ranking police officer, like just not a bobby on the beat, actually somebody of rank, came down to tell them, don't go to the mosque, we can't guarantee your safety, you might cause an incident. And so that's happening in a major Australian city right now, and it's been going on for quite some time, and that kind of thing is going to start happening in New Zealand soon if people choose not to do anything about it, right? This is a thing about the cultural war and cultural dilution. Unless people all know the national anthem, speak the same language, in usual cases have a similar religion, because New Zealand's a very much a Christian nation, or at least it was. The words of the national anthem, God of nations at thy feet, in God we treat, that kind of thing. God defend New Zealand. These are all parts of our national anthem. And if people are coming into your nation and they do not share your same vision of God, and yet they don't believe in the 10 commandments and so on and so forth, by which the maxims of law governing freedom are ostensibly based on, then you're going to have problems. You're going to have racial conflict. You're going to have difficulty with communication. I mean, imagine how difficult it is to campaign in English alone. That's a very difficult thing to run a campaign, and then imagine that you have to craft it into, say, 20 different languages or something, because the vast majority of the population are having a little bit of trouble with their English. Right? That's something that's going to happen sooner rather than later, and indeed we already have, I think it was the former chief whip of the National Party, that's the Republican equivalent in New Zealand, a man named Jamie Lee Ross, leaked a recording of him having a conversation with the then National Party head, Simon Bridges, saying that they would sell a Member of Parliament's seat for $100,000 to a Chinese investor so that they could get one of their people in. Now, Chinese infiltration of New Zealand has been going on for quite some time. It was, in point of fact, in New Zealand author Ian Wishart's book, Totalitaria, where he chronicled a investigation that was conducted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada in the mid-90s. They wanted to know how much of their cities were owned by the Chinese government and how many of their ports were infiltrated by Chinese organized crime. They found that 100% of their ports, 100% of their ports were infiltrated by organized crime, and that they owned, I think it was between 60 and 80% of downtown Vancouver, and that was in the mid-90s. Now, that investigation got shut down at the highest levels. That means it got shut down by the Prime Minister's office, and that means that at the time, in the mid-90s, the Chinese infiltration had already taken over the Prime Minister's office of Canada. Right? This is how they do it. If you have the People's Liberation Army Intelligence, that's the Chinese CIA, and the Triads, that's the Chinese Mafia, working together, one of them has a whole bunch of laundered drug money from criminal activities, and the other has intelligence connections. What you can do is you can basically make ordinary, innocent, completely oblivious people suddenly rich and suddenly have approved a passport somewhere. How did they do this? Well, a bunch of embassies have had the finger pointed at them as being releasing these fake passports without proper checks and balances, and basically rubber stamping and approving them. So when that Chinese agent, who was loaded with a bunch of laundered drug money from the Triads, comes into your nation, they are instructed to purchase your businesses, not change the name of the business, and just keep running it, to purchase your homes, and to start having children. Have those children study as hard as they possibly can so they get really high marks in high school, and then make those children go to university and study hard as they can so they get top marks for that, and then instruct their children to go get a government job. And slowly but surely, over the years and decades that this process has been occurring, we have had a wholesale infiltration of the government, including in the case when former Prime Minister, who was a former Federal Reserve banker at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, in charge of derivatives trading in the European theatre by chance, came here to become the Prime Minister in 2008 to save us from the financial crisis that he admitted on television he helped cause. Right? And he was given advice by I think it was something about nearly 170 different intelligence advisors about the construction of the backbone of New Zealand's telecommunication network. He was advised by, I think at the time it was reported in the news as being every single intelligence advisor in the country advised John Key not to let a Chinese-owned company with connections to the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese CIA, to build the entire backbone network to our country. And of course, John Key said, nah, she'll be right, bro. And now that is what we have. We have a completely Chinese-owned and intelligence operation backbone to our entire internet structure. Right? And again, this is how the corruption works. It's what we might call astroturf, but the technical term is something the late Penny Bright informed me and was trying to inform others of. This type of corruption is called state capture, where you get control of Parliament at the policy level so that when policies are passed, they benefit your criminal organisation rather than those people who the policies are supposed to be for, the people. And that's what's happening here.
Wow. So I never thought of what the Chinese intelligence agencies, but it sounds like they're definitely got their hands in what's going on in New Zealand. It's very sad because, and maybe in some ways it's easier to take over a small country than it is to take over a large country because there's only 5 million people there and it's not that hard to get to the top.
Well, I mean, there's a billion plus Chinese people, and they've got unlimited money through their international... I mean, it's the largest world criminal organization is the Triads. So here's the thing. They are not just infiltrating New Zealand. This is their plan for the world. And so what I have told you here about how they do things and how they go about things, if you apply it to your own country and then start investigating using those tools of recognition, you'll find out that more or less the exact same process is occurring on nearly every country worldwide. I haven't seen a country that I've investigated yet that has no Chinese infiltration going on. So it's like when I was a young talk radio show host and just starting doing what I was doing, I was listening to Infowars.com and Alex Jones. I would say too much because it drove me nuts. And the thought occurred to me that, hey, all these things that he says are going on in the United States are happening here in New Zealand, right? It's like a hologram. A part of the structure is reflected in every other part of the structure. There is no real ostensible difference between the way corruption operates in the United States and the way corruption operates in New Zealand, but it will have a different accent.
Well, the corruption certainly is spreading. I mean, I've heard a lot about, what Chinese intelligence is doing. It's very scary but interesting. And of course, possibly other things too, like Russian intelligence, and it's all just about influencing public opinion. I mean, who do you think is? You talked about the groups. How is the group getting a bunch of immigrants? Because I know it. In some cases, you're getting a lot of immigrants from Muslim countries, which seems to be the case with a lot of places outside of America.
Policies that get introduced. For example, a South African friend of mine found it very, very difficult to immigrate to New Zealand, and so did my former American producer, the fabulous Mitch Santel. What they do is they say, oh, you can immigrate to New Zealand if you've got the points for it, and the points are basically money. Right? If you've got money or if you've got skills that we need, we'll allow you in. So what's interesting, though, is that you'll have doctors say, for example, I was driven in a taxi by this guy from Punjab, and he said that he was actually a medical doctor. Like, he was a qualified medical doctor, and when he immigrated to New Zealand, they said, oh, great, we need medical doctors, and then after you pay your first amount, of immigration, they then say, "Oh no, actually, you can't do that in New Zealand." After they've taken his money, and say, now you actually have to retrain in a New Zealand institution and get more medical debt, for that education in order to qualify to work here. And that's when the second strike comes, not from the front, but from the side, where they give you a second and a third immigration financial packet where you have to pay. The second is much, much larger than the first, and the third is much, much larger than the second. And so you wind up getting these people coming into here who have skills that the country could utilize, purposely not being utilized, and purposely taking money off of them so that they have to get menial jobs, right? What kind of frustration and anger would that really cause someone? Now, we also take a lot of refugees, to my knowledge, and it seems to be regardless of skill or aptitude or IQ or whatever. Oh, you're a refugee? Yep, sweet as, we'll take you on in there. So as far as exactly how the immigration system works in order to bring in this huge amount of people coming into the country, I am not 100% sure.
Well, it sounds like somebody might be just organizing all this. I mean, it's not quite like the slave trade, but if they're just bringing them over, rounding up 1,000 people, and it seems like to me, though, if you're concerned about immigration, I don't know what legal areas this would fall under. If this would be considered racketeering or human trafficking, or I don't know what you'd call it. It just seems like to me there's something. Some way that this ought to be illegal to be doing this, especially if you're facilitating illegal immigration.
Well, unethical, immoral doesn't necessarily equal illegal. And that's the thing. With New Zealand, we don't have checks and balances. So you could pass something, for example, a response act to the pandemic, and that would be passed at 4:00 in the morning when nobody else is there to argue the point, and it will be implemented immediately, granting untold powers of search and seizure and violations of what previously used to be rights. And that can just happen in the morning while you're asleep. Right? No discussion, no debate, no process of this gets passed here and then it gets implemented there. It's just passed and implemented in an hour, sort of thing. So they can very much quick fire away and do what they want with the people of this country.
Okay, so I guess there's nothing, although you would be considered maybe an accessory to illegal activities.
Well, not really, because you can also pass laws retroactively in New Zealand, as former Prime Minister John Key did when he was giving the Government Communications and Security Bureau, the GCSB, new search and surveillance powers. Now, the legislation to give them these new search and surveillance powers was instituted into Parliament after a news story broke that the GCSB was illegally spying on up to 80 activists and people in New Zealand, including myself. And as a result, included in the legislation was a phrase allowing for the retroactive forgiveness of all criminal activity of the GCSB. So that's the thing. You can actually pass laws yesterday in this country. Like you don't even just pass them today. You can pass them 10 years ago and now punish everybody or let people go today. It's quite extraordinary.
Yes, it is. I mean, it seems like there's something going on here. I mean, I'm just saying, if somebody's going to rob a bank and I drive him to the bank and I know he's going to do that, I could be considered an accessory, even though I didn't actually rob the bank.
Yeah, and
just the same way as somebody who also, drives the getaway car.
And what's
It's
problematic?
rather wild. It's rather wild, yeah. So
In New Zealand,
is this also infiltrated? Yeah.
The legal system has also been heavily corrupted in this sense. I remember an activist named Vince Seymour, who was acting as a court watchdog along with the late Penny Bright, and I've been very close to both of these two since I began. And he said that there's a very small amount of judges, almost the same amount of people in Parliament as there are High Court justices in this country, and most of them are related by first cousin at least, including in the Supreme Court. We used to have a thing called the Privy Council, whereas if the local court, the High Court, was corrupt, you could at least go to the Privy Council in England and get a more comprehensive overview of your case. And many people fighting important issues have had to go to the Privy Council and won. So again, what the New Zealand Parliament did is they annexed that entire process and they instituted a Supreme Court at the cost of, I think it was $8 million to build the court building to house just 8 Chief Justices, who 2 of which were a husband and wife. And they were all appointed by the chief prosecutor of the National Party at the time. I forget his name. It might have been something funny, like the kind of names that you can't make up when they're doing these kind of things. And it turned out that all these justices that they'd appointed were friendly to the Parliament. Very similarly to how George H.W. Bush appointed chief justices to the Supreme Court in the United States, who were ultimately responsible for overriding the election result in the 2000 election, preventing Al Gore from winning and allowing the previous president's son, George W. Bush, to be elected president because all his daddy's friends on the Supreme Court voted the right way. So, yeah, again, we can see echoes and accents of very similar types of corruption happening in most nations. New Zealand's a very important case study because of this fact that we have the ability to pass legislation instantly and retroactively, because it is essentially a litmus test for what a Western public is prepared to put up with. And in New Zealand, we're basically prepared to put up with anything. Now, my theory for the reason why the vast majority of peoples in Western nations are willing to put up with anything is because of the food pyramid. Okay, if you have a look at the food pyramid and you have a look at the liver function basically gets destroyed by a lot of the things that we have in our day-to-day diet. And so the first symptom of a ill-functioning liver is apathy. People stop caring about things because they're unhealthy, they're sick at a very fundamental level because of their diet and various other things that they've been exposed to in the environment. What can you do to an apathetic population? What can you do to people who don't care about anything? And the answer is anything you want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything you want. That's true. You can do anything you want. Yeah. I didn't realize liver function. What kind of foods are these in particular? This makes a lot of sense that you'd want to mess with people and just make them apathetic.
So if you're eating vegetables, they'll often be sprayed in herbicides, pesticides. Both of these screw the liver. If you're drinking alcohol, obviously, any kind of sugar, any kind of high fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, a lot of processed foods, stabilizers, artificial colors, and basically the thing that is in almost the entirety of the food supply. Now, people would say, oh, but there's organic, Vinny, and blah, blah, blah. And I go, okay, that would be great maybe in your country, but in New Zealand, according to one person that I spoke to, having the organic classification on your foods being sold in New Zealand requires that you have a percentage of organic ingredients in them. Not 100%, a percentage, roughly between 80 and 90% organic. Now, if herbicide and pesticide, for example, doesn't comprise by weight up to 10% of your food or whatever, you can have quite a lot in there, right? So then you go, oh, okay, well, what do I just grow my own food? Okay, that would be great if they weren't chemtrailing everything with aluminium, barium, and strontium in order to contaminate your outdoor gardens with 30,000 times the normal trace amounts of aluminium, which seeps into the soil, seeps into your plants, and then gives you freaking Alzheimer's and incidentally damages the liver. All right, so there is a idea called full spectrum dominance, where everything, everywhere, at all times will be controlled by the coming world government, and they essentially want to create a god-like artificial intelligence system in order to control absolutely everything in real time, all the time, for perpetuity, right? So there won't be any freedom, there won't be any good food, everybody's going to be sick or dying or miserable with life, but they will be capably able to dope themselves up on drugs and things of that nature that are provided by the pharmaceutical industry, which have a long list of negative side effects and only a few unproven claims of benefit.
That's pretty wild. I mean, I do wonder sometimes if there's a conspiracy to make us eat bad food. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. Sometimes it just seems that way because it's so easy to get unhealthy stuff and lower testosterone levels and stuff like that. It's they just want to turn us into apathetic sheep, and that makes us easier to rule.
Yeah, there you go. If you're unhealthy, there's a term called fighting fit, right? You know, when people are real fit, they call it fighting fit. And if you're not fighting fit, you're vulnerable, you know? And there's an old saying, there's with the trans agenda and so on and so forth. If your nation doesn't have any real men, you know, big, strong, aggressive, to take out invaders and things of that nature, and if you don't have any real women who are nurturing and sweet to take care of those men when they get injured and stuff like that, your country will not survive being invaded by a nation that does have real men and real women, right? In Arabic culture, masculinity is very, very dominant, and you know there is a lot of talk online about quote unquote military age males from the Middle East infiltrating into the West. Now, this has been talk of Sharia law and the oppression of women being introduced into the West as well. And this is a big problem, say, for example, in England, where Tommy Robinson has found that the legal system is very, very unwilling to tackle this issue of Pakistani rape gangs. People who come from Pakistan with their culture come to England and are indeed grooming and raping young British girls quite significantly. And in point of fact, I would maybe, even if I would go so far as to say it like an industrial scale, that I remember this one story about a house that had a blackboard outside on the porch. And so each of these guys who had a share in this house would put a mark next to their name on the blackboard every time they took a British girl to that house to rape. Okay, and then at the end of each week, they would tally up who had used the house for raping the most, and they would all pay a proportional amount of the rent. Now, in New Zealand, I think it was out in Howick of East Auckland, they had a story come out that there were like 40 of these such age males from the Middle East living in a single house. right?
Yes.
It was absolutely crazy. So there's a lot of things that are going on that need a significant investigation into, and need these issues to be understood by the wider public, and need those issues to have something done about them with understanding, with care, and with reality and facts. Now, what's problematic is because nobody cares about anything because of the things that are being deliberately put into every single part of their life, that's not going to happen very shortly.
Yes, and has it been decided, though, isn't it racist to call it a blackboard? We should call it a chalkboard because, it's I don't know, using the word black like that, it might be offensive to
Well, I played chess once, and
I'm being sarcastic.
And I picked the white rather than the black, and I was accused of being racist. All right, now there's some level of insanity that's going on here. I could call a conversation with Professor Ed Dutton, the jolly heretic, and he said that being left on the political spectrum is an indicator of mental illness. And sure enough, you go and you talk to these climate cultists and things of that nature, they're off. They're rockers. They're completely insane. And then if you go to the other end of the spectrum, this is what I found very interesting. And when I was 15 years old, my history teacher, Mr. Brady, had this poster on the wall that had the left of the political spectrum on one side and the spectrum in between, and the right of the political spectrum on the other side. And what it did is it measured the amount of totalitarianism that came in from either belief structure. And on either end, it's totalitarian, right? So that means that both leftism and right-wingism is ostensibly, in their purest forms, totalitarian systems of government. Now, the only thing that is a political system of government that does not result in totalitarianism is anarchanism, as in they are anti-controllers. If you are elected to represent people, you can't tell anybody what to do, right? They tell you what to do. That's how it's supposed to work in a freedom-based society, where there are no masters, where there are no slaves. But that is not the majority standpoint and view of the general public at this point, generally speaking, because they have either a left brain imbalance, a right brain imbalance, which is brought on from having mummy issues or having daddy issues. So if you've got an entire population that's completely apathetic about anything because they're completely poisoned, or they have mental health issues, or they have mummy or daddy issues, controlling them is going to be quite easy. All you have to do is lie to them and say that we're doing it for your safety.
Yes. Your safety. It's all being done for your safety, yes. Vinny, it doesn't help, of course, that you all don't really have an armed citizenry down there. I mean,
we did.
You did.
But as I mentioned before, with an act of Parliament 2 weeks after the Christchurch mosque massacre, which is illegal to view the video in New Zealand, punishable up to 10 years, illegal to share the video, punishable up to 10 years, and illegal to read or share the manifesto, also for up to 10 years imprisonment. So I'm not going to talk too much about what I learned during my 2 days of investigation that I was able to do before it became illegal to be a journalist in this country, to investigate that particular incident. I'm not going to talk about that. However,
that really made me real. Yeah, I don't want to get you in trouble. That whole incident really made me wonder about New Zealand.
So 2 weeks later, every single gun was taken. All right. One guy has shot up a place. Okay, everybody who is law-abiding citizens now need to turn in all their guns. Okay, and what happens when you ban guns for law-abiding citizens? Criminals keep using them, and they know that their victims are not armed, so they become even more brazen. And as a result, in every single gun ban that has ever happened in history, murder rate starts going up at a rate unheard of. Okay? Shootings go up at a rate unheard of. Every gun ban zone in the United States, like what was it, in Washington, D.C., is a murder capital of the world. I remember one time they did a meditation to try and bring down the murder rate. They had 3,000 people meditating to bring down the murder rate by 30%. And the chief of Washington, D.C. police said, hey, it'll take like 6 feet of snow in order to bring the murder rate down by that much. And these people meditated, and it did come down that much. DC, gun ban zone. Chicago, one of the most violent cities in the world. Gun ban zone. Where do a lot of these mass shootings in the United States occur? In gun ban
Gun-free zones.
So in Israel, they had a different modality to disarming their citizens. They did the exact opposite. They promoted the idea of concealed carry permits. And so when one group of Palestinian terrorists at the time, this was many years ago, they used to use AK-47s to shoot up places rather than suicide bombs. Now they changed that tactic because of this particular incident I'm about to tell you. When you are guarding an area, you had soldiers on the street, they experimented with that. Didn't work, because as soon as the soldier rotated and the shift changes, that gives the quote-unquote terrorist the ability to go in and start shooting up the place. So when they gave people the ability to conceal carry weapons, a bunch of these Palestinian terrorists went into a mall and they started shooting up the place. And to the surprise, all these old men and women started pulling their own guns out and shooting back. And 2 of them died, and the third one was being taken to hospital with multiple bullet wounds. And the paramedics in the ambulance said that this man was absolutely beside himself. He's like, nobody told us the old ladies would have guns. Hey mate, look, if you want gun crime to go down, statistically speaking, the more guns you have in the hands of law-abiding citizens, statistically speaking, that is the most likely factor to prevent gun crime from happening in the first place.
Yes.
In the United States, I think it was was it Dr. John Lott or just John Lott? I forget. But he did this presentation called More Guns, Less Crime.
Less Crime, yes.
And apparently it was something over 200,000 assaults, rapes, murders, thefts, home invasions and things of that nature never happened. All right, that's 200,000 crimes that just never happened just because the potential victim, presented a firearm, not even pointing it at them, not even firing a shot, just pulling up a gun and just be like, do you really want to do this? And the person goes no and runs away, because most criminals who are looking for victims are cowards. So the second something that is actually a threat to their physical existence, they run off invariably in a cowardly fashion. So there's good things to be seen in terms of that debate, if you look at John Lott, More Guns, Less Crime. But ultimately, at the end of the day, New Zealanders have been disarmed, and now the only people that have weapons are the criminals and the government, who are also criminals, both of groups that prey on the disarmed, which is now everybody.
Yes. Vinny, I don't know if there's much more to ask, but how do you think New Zealand can get out of this? I asked you if you think Kiwis want to live under abusive government. You said yes.
It's like, that
was one of my favorite moments on this show.
It's like, if you look at that apathy subject, do you say, that's probably the reason why people want to live in a tyrannical government, because they just don't actually care in either way. I think it was a French philosopher, it might have been Immanuel Kant or some other kind of Kant, But he said that the reason why people obey dictators in general is indifference. Okay, dictators are generally not the tallest or the strongest kind of people. You could probably take them out if you really wanted to in a fist fight. But the reason why people obey them and tyrannical societies come on is because people don't care. So, in my opinion, let's have a look at the entirety of the structure. So from the ground up, you need a complete societal restructuring. So in terms of how is healthcare for children, I believe you need to stop giving children vaccines in their entirety. I believe that the birthing process where you have the women lying down to give birth is also incredibly ineffective. They should be standing in a crouched kind of position, allowing gravity to assist with that. And getting rid of ultrasound as well, which Chinese studies have found can be damaging to the fetus as it's developing. Getting rid of vitamin K shots as well, which cause jaundice and actually swell the brain. So that's just when you're born. Now, as you're being raised, of course, now you need to think about mother's milk. So mother's milk filters fluoride out of the body. Actually, there's like 114th the amount of fluoride that the woman is drinking that actually winds up in her breast milk and coming to the baby. So we need to remove fluoride for the water, because obviously the body wouldn't filter that if it wasn't a complete frickin' neurotoxin. And there's also the manufacturing products. So if you've got a child, you're going to need lots and lots of different products. You're going to need diapers, you're going to need a crib, you're going to need clothing, so on and so forth. All of those things, I would say, are made from hemp. Right, hemp can be made into like 20 to 40,000 different industrial products that are as good, if not better, than the existing thing in a non-toxic, non-damaging way. So, from birth, you are being not poisoned, not being destroyed, and all the things that you are consuming to keep your life alive is going thing. Now, then we get into education. Education should be very similar to what it was pre-1880s, where they instituted a form of state education that was instituted by, I believe, the Prussian government, which became German later on in the peace. But they had a war with the French, and the French didn't have a public education system at that time that told them all that the leader of our country is the greatest and whatever, and sing the national anthems. So that when war broke out between those two nations, a lot of Prussians signed up for the cause and were very, very eager to go kill the enemy. And the French, on the other hand, were like, oh, have we got the croissant? I mean, what are we going to fight with? And it didn't work out too well for the French, as it usually, historically, doesn't. And they lost the war, and so everybody else instituted this public education system, which destroys creativity, it destroys independent thought, it destroys. It basically takes the mind, the body, and the spirit and wipes them out in order to implant a program. And that program is submission to authority. I believe the education system should be the opposite of that, where you would be teaching anarchianism at a young age, teaching objective morality, what right and wrong actually is, teaching them about the hermetic principles, the principle of true care, how to discern fact from fiction, as you get taught in journalism school, which is very similar to the trivium methodology, which I also believe needs to be instituted in as early a possible phase of education, which is to ask the questions who, what, when, where, how, and why, before you consider something a fact, and then get three sources who are independent of each other to back up that thing before you can consider it a fact. What you will then have is an anti-authoritarian child force who are independent, creative, and also being taught skills and trades at the same time. Now, after that education system, then the workforce needs to be structured differently as well. Currently, we have what you could be termed as a hierarchical structure, and hierarchical structures exist everywhere. You cannot avoid them, and they're not necessarily bad unless they're run in a unequal slave mentality type fashion. So instituting the new business policies whereby in order to be employed in a company, you actually have to purchase shares in it. Okay, and every morning or every week or whatever time, you have shareholder meetings, and the shareholders are just the people who work at the company. And so everybody in every single level of the company gets to speak their piece and talk about problems, gets to talk about new ideas, and then the people who are basically elected because of their skill sets to manage and stuff everything should only really be getting paid about maybe 10 times as much as the poorest person on the line. Now, what this did in the anarcho-syndicalist fashions in Spain and France is they actually made the economy significantly more powerful per capita because of the ability of what Arge Nos told me from Broadcast Team Alpha, the mastermind. Right here, you and I, Chris, we have a mastermind factor of 2. That means both of our minds, with both of our different experiences, can look at the same problem and come up with XYZ solutions and combine the power of our minds to come up with a better solution than either one of us could come up with by ourselves. If you apply that to a corporation, if you have the mastermind of the entire corporation working there, you're going to come up with significantly faster, more effective, and more beneficial changes to your corporate policies on a regular basis, so things do not become stagnant and people don't become miserable. This is how people can have lifetime work that they actually enjoy. Now, next to it, after this process has begun, going back to the education system, is people need to understand the 3 laws of the trivium. The first I told you before about how to distinguish fact and fiction. This is who, what, when, where, why, and how, and also about logical fallacies. There are many, many logical fallacies that people deploy in conversations, which fallare in Latin means to lie. This is where we get the term fallacy. So not only are you getting people who are able to discern fact from fiction, they're also able to detect lies within it. The second phase of the trivium is what you might think of as processing. If you have an interest in your life, whether it be podcasting or filmmaking or music or dancing or whatever it is that you feel that you want to do to earn a living, then you must process that information that you've learned. You've figured out what it is, but now you need to do it and practice it over and over again until at some point somebody could come up to you and ask the who, what, when, where, why, and how of that thing that you know how to do, and you'll be able to rattle off the answers just like that. Then phase 3 of your life begins, which is you take the knowledge that you have learned, put into practice, and then teach it to others. So that way, from birth to death, everybody has a purpose, everybody is free, nobody is poisoned, and nobody is subjugated, and everybody is able to contribute in more meaningful and fantastic ways that make the entirety of society healthier, more intelligent, more resistant to the threats of change and disaster than anybody could really ever imagine. And in terms of the parliamentary structure, so we've gone from birth to education to the workplace, and now there are those structures that overrule all of them. Now, this is where we would be implementing 2 main elements. There wouldn't really be a government per se. I mean, technically there isn't one because it's an abstraction. You can't touch government, just like you can't touch a forest. It's just a mental image of something. You have 2 phases. Number 1 is the online debate platform, which is being curated. So if you are going to be talking about a subject like fluoride, for example, there will be a way that everybody can contribute to this debate. there is a list of people that have made these comments, references to their links, and you can vote up or vote down those comments. And what you'll find was in the bubblegum ball jar analogy, or whatever it was called initially, that when you got a whole bunch of jelly beans in a jar and you have to get people to guess how many there are, you'll find that around about the correct answer is where most of the answers that people give in terms of their guesses will be. So like in general, people kind of get things right. And what this new debate system is going to do is it's going to vote up those comments that are correct based on evidence and vote down those ones that are conversely incorrect and full of abuse, like in trolling, for example. Vote up or vote down. Now, the secondary process that after that institution is implemented, where people can actually have rational, healthy debates where there are rules and there are clear results and clear facts being put across, then you can take those to citizens-initiated referenda, where again, everybody's got an app on their phone. The initiated referenda for today is take fluoride out of the water. Here's the top 10 points about what fluoride does, and here's the top 10 claims that have been debunked, and this is the 3 ways that we're going to go about it. Which one do you do? Okay, sweet as, cool, fluoride's out of the water. Everybody agrees because the debate has already happened and everybody has been included in that debate, and therefore all the people do is act as the conduits for the future of their civilization, and that's it.
Yeah, well, this has been a great talk, Vinny. I think we've got a good insight into what's going on in New Zealand. Have anything else you need to say?
Oh, yeah. Hold my beer. Just recently, I've been going through like a massive depressed buzz, that kind of thing. You're actually the first show that I've come back on air on since like May.
I'm glad I could raise you out of your doldrums, Vinny. You're putting out good content. And you're having a lot of fun doing it. That's important. Got to keep it fun.
Yeah. And what was interesting is that this whole kind of debacle in my life has given me a new, fountainhead of wisdom, right?
Yes.
I was trying to make a movie, and subsequently I've been let go from the movie, which really hit me hard. Like it was a huge kind of like betrayal, and
yes.
I'd invested so much time and effort into making this film, only to get ousted without even so much as a warning. And then I looked at all of the hard drives that I had from my previous shows, and I started looking through them one day, and I was like, wow, there are so many shows here, bro. And I haven't looked at them in so long that many of those hard drives are dead. And I had a realization that, oh my gosh, so many of the wonderful people that I've interviewed on my show who aren't around anymore, and the majority of that content isn't actually available online for anybody to speak to or listen to anymore because of the deplatforming that happened to me. So for the last week or so, I've been uploading 3 shows per day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening of my old shows. I'm starting with the first hard drive I plugged in, which is my 2013 shows. And as a result of actually listening to myself and listening to the guests on the shows, a lot of that real kind of like sadness and betrayal and depression that I was feeling is just not there anymore, right? Like I've encouraged myself, like previous, young Vinny has been encouraging me. And as a result, I am now feeling a lot better about everything, just because every single day I'm seeing the comments that people do, I'm seeing the likes they give the channel, I'm seeing all that support that they're giving me, and I was actually just really grateful, not only for the support and that kind of thing that I have now, but also because of the fact that now these people are getting to see the real Vinny Eastwood, the things that I have done in the past. And I was talking with some friends at band practice the other night, and it was kind of like difficult for me because you know how your reputation precedes you? As it were, there's a saying in that regard. Well, I recognise that my reputation wasn't preceding me anymore because it got freaking deleted, and and so people don't know who I am. They don't know what I've done. And the fact of the matter is, I'm really awesome at interviewing people. Right, I get a very, very common comment. It was like, Vinny is the #1 interviewer. And I get very similar comments from my guests as well. Vinny, this is the best interview that I've ever done. And I was sort of like doubting that. You know, when you get that period of doubt in your life, and you question yourself, and you're like, nobody loves me. And then you realize that actually people do love you, Vinny, and people do appreciate you, and the stuff that you did mattered to people. And now you get a chance to go through it all again.
Yep.
Listening to these shows was unbelievable, bro. And like, it was like 4 episodes. We were talking about the jinn, about aliens, about psychopaths, and Watiko, right? And I was just like, whoa! All of these things like just coming together, and I was like, it was just blowing my mind, and these really powerful realizations were coming to me. And when I told a joke on the show, I would laugh. Me in the real world here would laugh at it, and I was like, man, I love younger Vinny. He was great. He had a lot of energy. He had a lot of fire. What the hell happened to me? And the question invariably is that, Vinny, you weren't listening to your own shows. You weren't listening to yourself. The things that I told people and encouraged people with is probably the reason why a number of people have come to me privately and publicly, mind you, saying that they were at the point, at that cusp of taking their own life because of finding out about the New World Order, about the most important thing, which is called truth mania. All right, truth mania. When you start learning about the truth, it can drive you completely crazy if you evacuate your sense of humor from the situation. Yes. Right? I've seen too many truthers come up and then just go down, and go down hard, because they took everything so seriously and they forgot what they were fighting for. They forgot how much they loved their children. They forgot how much they loved their friends. They forgot how much they loved their family. They forgot how to have fun. They forgot to appreciate the things that they have. Right? There was one morning I got up and I was just like feeling real bad about myself, and then I had this realization. I was just like, I suddenly stood upright and I felt a lot better. And that realization was, I don't live in Gaza. I was just like, whew, thank God, you know, I dodged that bullet. It's like a great weight off my mind, bro. Like, it was just, you know, I was really worried there for a moment, and I just, you know, I'm not carrying my child's dead limp body down a street that's 98% rubble. I feel great all of a sudden. Now it may sound cold, but that's what you got to do. Okay, there is something about humor and appreciating what you've got that is absolutely essential to the human experience, and I forgot it. I was the one telling everybody, hey man, any delay that happens, any stressful thing that happens is actually something that needed to happen. That was actually a blessing that you needed in order to motivate you to do X, Y, Z that you previously didn't have the motivation, didn't have the time, or something like that for. It was an extraordinary revelation that I gave to myself by watching my old shows. And I was like, I'm starting to actually realize now why people loved me and followed me so much, and why I became the most subscribed YouTube channel in the country for news. It's because of the way that I put things. It's because of the ridiculous segues that I do on the thing, and the stupid little jokes, and the deep insights mixed in with it, with listening to my guests and getting all this stuff. I was like, man, I'm Vinny Eastwood. That's awesome. Look at him go. And you know, it seems like it's stroking I'm stroking my own ego, or at least a past version of me is stroking my ego today, and rubbing my own shoulders from the past or whatever, and just go, it's okay, Vinny, there, everything's gonna be okay. I was like, oh, thanks, Vinny. It's like, yeah, mate, you just forgot. And maybe this comes into a deeper recognition, because what if that's not true for me only? What if that is true for a good portion of the talk radio show host? What if it's actually true, theoretically, for everybody? People freaking forget how gosh darn awesome they are. Chris, you, at certain times, have forgotten how awesome you are, and sometimes you need that little reminder, and just pat yourself on the back and just be like, yeah, you did it, Chris, you did another show. Or like, yeah, man, you finished making the dinner. Oh, yeah, mate, you finished doing your washing, or you finished vacuuming. Doesn't matter what it is, we don't give ourselves enough credit sometimes, and we don't recognize the dynamic that we're currently living in, which is past plus present plus perception of the future. Okay, your past has done certain things to you, and you've done certain things in your past, and that's part of who you are. What you're doing in the present about those things, are you trying to regress and go backwards, or are you trying to move forwards? And the second is the future. Is it with hope, or is it with fear? And I believe that if you accurately look at your past, and you look at all the horrible things that have been done to you, all the horrible things that people have said and done to you, that you didn't get corrupted, you didn't lose your sense of humor, you didn't become some kind of parasite on the human race's experience in this physical plane, did you? That is not a small achievement, ladies and gentlemen, and I probably include the vast majority of my guests and my listeners in that category. God, you guys have been through so much, and man, you're good for resisting that temptation to just give up and be dark and be a pain in the ass and a thorn in the side of everybody you know. You already were that, because you're the truther, okay? Nobody wants to listen to you, but at least somebody will listen to you. One person, even if it's one, that's important. It's important to get that little tidbits of success amongst all this darkness, and to remind ourselves what we've been through, what we have survived, recognize how awesome we truly are. That is what keeps us alive. That is what keeps us moving forward. That is what keeps us doing that which we were born, bred, and built to do, which in our case as radio hosts, as podcasters, is help to basically spread the light. Whatever the light is, whether it's being light-hearted and helping people to deal with the darkness, or whether it's shining light on the darkness and making the unknown known, making the subliminal liminal, making the depressing freaking hilarious. This is what we're capable of doing. We are alchemists in terms of psychology and spirit, and we are capable of making people's rusted iron reform itself into beautiful gold. That is what our job is, and it is a terrible burden, but it must be done because the alternative is, of course, getting enslaved and subsequently exterminated by ruthless criminal sociopathic scumbaggery. And that is all Vinny Eastwood has to say right now. Is there any questions?
No, I think we can now officially say that Vinny Eastwood is New Zealand's version of Javier Milei, although he's not Prime Minister. Thank you, Vinny. It's been great having you back. Please like this show, subscribe to this channel, go buy my novel Escape from the Village, check out my Substack, and people are giving me money at buymeacoffee.com. Thank you for coming back on, Vinny Eastwood. It's glad we could work this out. You making me want to visit New Zealand. So I'm Chris Baker, and we are out.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.